Welcome back then folks to day 3 of course of Special Projects Pack number 9, and we are finally finishing off my trio of Super Taikyu cars, probably with the least desirable of the 3, the Toyota Aqua. But then again, I feel like this could be one of those builds where for some people it might finally give the Toyota Aqua that you've had sitting in your garage for a while at least something to do. And interestingly, as weird as this car feels in comparison to the Honda and the Mazda, which I already did, so of course check those out, this one is actually quicker than you'd think, even though it has that more CVT style approach to its gearbox, of course being more of an obvious approach to a hybrid in the case of this one. Now once again, of course, I put on screen that you can grab this particular livery by clicking on the link in the description. Of course, loads of people have done tons and tons of different liveries, and this one, of course, you don't have to go for it. I think out of the 3, the most iconic is probably the Honda because of the spoon livery, but with this one, you could go for whatever you want. As far as the parts, we are trying to conform as much as possible to the ST5 Super Taikyu rules, which is mostly more like sports stuff rather than racing stuff. Once again, as I think I've mentioned before, it's funny to me how all 3 cars end up with exactly the same weight, almost like they planned for people to do stuff like this, which is pretty cool. With this one though, I did have to fit a few racing things just to get it up to the same level as the other 2 cars, which I guess kind of says a lot, but we'll get to those when you see them. So for the computer and the filter, and also actually the silencer as well, or at least in particular the filter and the silencer, you don't actually need those. I fitted them while I was building it, but I found that I needed better ones than that for the car to be competitive. So your sports computer and the sports pads in particular, the comfort mediums are of course already on it. I've updated those to sports hards, stage 1 weight, of course. For the club sports section, we've got the sports clutch and flywheel, the sports discs, stage 2 weight. Then for the semi-racing stuff, the fully customized computer. I don't recall off the top of my head if I'm using the sports one or the full. I think I may be using the sports one though. So of course you could jump forward in the video before buying either of them. We've got the racing crank. Again, it's a bit of an overkill thing, but I had to, keep the car competitive somehow. As far as the suspension, I've got the height adjustable sports setup, the fully customized diff. I actually don't have stage 3 weight because once again I wanted the weight to be pretty much equal on all 3. As far as the racing stuff, we've got the polished ports, balanced tuning, as I said, the exhaust and filter in race spec, the race manifold as well, which of course is the only one, there's no sports manifold or anything like that. And then for the extreme section, I actually haven't fitted the angle adapter. And if I recall correctly, I think the reason why I didn't is because I actually built this quite a while ago. And I only started really putting the adapters on loads of cars after this. So in retrospect, you probably should go for that, and it might even be better than what I've done here. So give it a try, and certainly you can find out, I guess. And then for the titanium connecting rods and pistons, those are slapped on there as well. So not the most expensive build. Obviously the car itself is pretty cheap, which helps, and chances are most of us have probably got something like this in your garage anyway. As you can see, for the point level, similar to the other 2 at 451. So, as far as the actual tuning, of course we've got the sports hard tyres on there. For the suspension, 100mm for the ride height, 1 on anti-roll, 35 and 45 for the dampers, 2.15 for the springs, a little bit of camber on the rear, just 0.5, 1 on the front. For the toe, that is non-adjustable of course with that suspension setup. For the diff, I've opted for 10, 20 and 20 as you can see. No transmission adjustment. You do have that basically single speed drive, of course, with this one. For the fully customized ECU, which, as I said, is fitted, so hopefully you check that before buying them. I guess it doesn't really matter. The sports one isn't that expensive anyway. And then over here, of course, you can see all of the other stuff which we have fitted. Naturally, just like with all of the other builds, we now need to jump out to Tsukuba, in particular, to compare this to the other 2 cars, though. The interesting thing is, I fully expected that this was going to be, probably by some margin, the slowest of the 3 cars, because it does not feel quick. The CVT transmission makes it feel so sluggish to drive, and even with numbers bumped up by racing parts, which technically would disqualify anyway, but I just had to make it competitive against the other 2 cars somehow, and even then, the point level is still not as high on this car as I think at least the Honda. I seem to recall the Honda was like up around 470, so like a good 20-point difference. And yet, this is quicker. This is the quickest of the 3 here at Tsukuba, which makes no sense because it feels really sluggish, but You can't say it's a power advantage, I guess. It's got just as much horsepower as the others. Maybe the fact that it doesn't waste as much time on gear changes could give it an advantage, as sluggish as it feels. And if that is the case, I find that quite hilarious, because it's a similar feeling to what my Evo drove like in real life. I had an Evo 7 GTA, for those who don't follow the channel, and it was kind of similar. It was quicker than it felt, but it felt so sluggish because the gearbox felt like a CVT. So if you do decide to use this one, obviously I hope it gives you some joy out of the Aqua, a car which I feel like most players probably don't use much. So of course, stick around for the rest of the week for the other special projects in pack number 9. Check out the ones which I've already done this week if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time for more. But for now, thanks for watching.